Hey there, I am Barb Higgins, and this is 1,000 Tiny Steps. In this podcast, I share my stories of love, loss, triumph, and tragedy as I continue to retrace my steps and ponder what led to the death of my daughter Molly. By doing so, I hope to not only help myself, but to bring purpose and possibility to those who listen. If you are ready to laugh, cry, shake your head in disbelief, then tie, buckle, face up, or slip on your shoes and join me as we begin our 1,000 Tiny Steps. Hey everybody, sweaty, smelly Barb Higgins here, welcoming you to episode 150 of 1,000 Tiny Steps. Human nature being what it is easy sometimes for us to consider a journey, to consider the first of many tiny steps, to take a small move. And lots of people start journeys and take 3 or 4 steps and then bag the journey. I am the queen of the journey bagging, taking a few small steps and then deciding for whatever reason, I can't move on. We're up to step 3 now in this season 9, 12 episode stint on the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Step 1 is sort of saying like, okay, I give. I admit it. I'm powerless over alcohol. My life is unmanageable. I acknowledge this to be true. I am nothing. I have acknowledged this. And then step 2, came to believe a power higher than ourselves could restore us to sanity. There's the journey. You come to believe something. You research it, you read, you listen to people's stories, you fake it till you make it. You process along information as you come to see the truth and the realization in something. And that's what steps 1 and 2 are about. You make an acknowledgement of a truth and you come to believe that, you know what, probably something stronger than me could help restore my sanity. I don't have to do this myself. Those don't require too much self-sacrifice. Self-reflection, yes, in realizing that you're an alcoholic and acknowledging it and saying it. But the process, the coming to believe, allows for wiggle room and freedom. And I think human nature is such that not very many people like to be told what to do. Don't tell me what to do, or I'm going to do the opposite. Don't tell me not to do that, or I'm going to do it. And you see this in kids. When I say, Jack, don't do that, he just looks at me with a face and does it anyway. The lessons in the companion journal to Breathing Underwater, the little breathing lessons they call, go along with the nature of the steps. And so the breathing lessons for step 1 were just that, breathing. Take slow, deep breaths. Practice that meditative, reflective, nervous system calming breathing. Super important physical connection to emotional well-being, slow breaths. We were also told in the breathing lessons for step 1 to ponder the following statements. We suffer to get well. We surrender to win. We die to live. We give it away to keep it. So this is some terrific foreshadowing in the writer of this journal as to what comes next as we go through the steps, the 12 steps. So then step 2, came to believe a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So there's a process. Let's come to believe that some sort of higher power, something bigger than us, can make us better. And the breathing lessons there focus on 2 things. One of them is how to make yourself feel better when you're struggling. To come to believe something, you have to let go of a lot of beliefs, which is what those 4 statements were at the end of step 1. So here, 2 things. Participate in activities that free you. So physical movement, physical activity, deep breathing, massage, dance, music, theater, painting, arts, praying, singing, all of these things work on your body in a very physical way to make you feel better. So it said that the breathing lessons were be good to your body this week. Find a way to care for your body, take care of it. So those are the breathing lessons for step 2. And so I just finished step 2. This was my step 2 week. So how did I do on those? Well, I have restructured my life a bit to be more mindful of what I'm eating. I've stopped drinking for the time being. So those are things I'm doing to make my body feel better. I've also made myself get back into the habit of daily working out. I've been in a boot, so it's easy to just blow it off and not work out. But when I'm healthy and well and really living my life, it doesn't even dawn on me not to work out. It's a part of my reality. The other thing that it said in this week to do for breathing lessons is to meditate on the following passage. So this is a bit of a religious one, so to speak. I think you can, in your own mind, you can substitute words to make it sort of anything. May the God of peace make you whole and holy. May you be kept safe in body, heart, and mind, and thus ready for the presence God has called you and will not fail you. Ready for the presence. It doesn't tell you what the presence is, just the presence. That's a really hopeful saying to me. So I've read it out loud every day this week. That's what I did to sort of focus myself on this particular saying. Those were the 2 breathing lessons for step 2. So now we're into step 3. The title of the chapter is Sweet Surrender. Okay. So this is a difficult one. This is a difficult one for a lot of people because it involves decision making. And in the process of decision making comes a whole bunch of conflict. Can you resolve it? Does the conflict win? Do you have to choose a side? Are you being told what to do and following blindly? All of the things that make a toddler stomp their foot and say, no, get addressed here. So here's step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. And in parentheses, they have him, her, them, it. I've made a decision. Usually when you make a decision, that's it. The decision's been made. To turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him, her, them, God. So the biggest thing here is that we're not being asked as recovering addicts early in the steps to believe in a certain type of God. If you join the Catholic Church, you have to believe in the Catholic God. If you join the Jewish faith, you have to believe the Jewish God. If you're a Hindu, you have to believe the Hindu God. A religion will teach you the reality of God within that religion. That's religious doctrine. That's how that works. I'm not judging it at all. But the alcoholic could be anybody, and maybe there's no God in that alcoholic's life. So how do you turn your will and your care over to the care of something that you don't think exists? You develop the willingness to believe there's a higher power. And however you view it, that's the higher power. So an atheist on step 3 could simply say, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of the universe as we understand it. So you're turning your care over to a power greater than yourself. You're turning it over. You're letting it go. This is probably one of the most difficult aspects of my life. I say I'm going to make a change, and I do all of these outward things that indicate the change, but I don't let go of my inside thoughts and emotions and feelings. I hold on to it. I'm just rearranging my room, hoping I'll somehow have a better layout. But I'm not really looking at what's in my room and cleaning it and throwing things away and replacing things. I'm just taking the same chaos and organizing it differently. I'm changing nothing. A song came to me, a Bruce Springsteen song, No Retreat, Baby, No Surrender. and as an athlete, I look at surrender and giving up as failing. Like, okay, fine, I'm going to slow down. I'm tired. I don't want to win this race. Athletically speaking, the thought of giving up is difficult. But what I've come to learn in the past couple of weeks is that we aren't giving up so much as giving in to our current reality. So right now, in this step, making a decision to turn my will over to the care of God, I'm making a decision to surrender my will, to step back and say, okay, I'll stop controlling this. This is incredibly difficult for me. One of my biggest issues in my work with Karen, she would get so frustrated with me. I would say, I want to make all these changes, and we'd have this amazing conversation, and I'd hang up and I'd go out and do what I always did. I would change nothing. And 2 weeks later, I'd be like, what? I just so disconnected. So cognitive dissonance plays a big role in this for me. I haven't really given it over. And if I had to venture a guess why, when I asked myself that age-old question, how old am I when I have this feeling? I made so many deals with God as a child to try to get my abuse to stop. And of course, none of those deals worked because it wasn't up to me. I wasn't the reason I was being abused. The only thing I could have done is run away or finally told, which I finally did. I have a hard time believing that any prayer is going to be answered, that it's really going to make a difference. So I provide lip service, and then I just keep doing what I'm doing. So acceptance and surrender. This cuts right to the chase, and it gives new meaning to mercy killing, like a mercy killing, right? When you think about what's a mercy killing, you're killing something because something else needs to survive. It can be really, really tricky stuff. Surrender will always feel like dying. It's like the mercy killing is within you, right? That's a big piece for me. How do I give it over? How do I give it over to God or to anything? I can remember in my relationship with Roy, so many times he would say, just do what I say. And the 2 or 3 times that I did what he said, terrible things happened to me. And I don't know even how to frame that. Is that because I didn't want to go down that path, but I reward myself with failure when I give myself over to anybody. That's sort of how backwards I feel about it. So the opposite of not giving up in athletics, and I talked about that. You don't give up, don't give up. And here I'm being told, give up, give it over, give in. So the addict and the abused victim can often use athletics to feel in control. This is why I think for me, giving up is difficult. The first time I liked my body was when I started running, and it was because I could control it. I could control how it felt. I could cause it pain and overcome it. It was built flawlessly for running. It was the first time I liked how I looked. Running made me feel amazing. I had the serotonin and the dopamine and the runner's high and all of this. So a lot of endurance athletes, especially female endurance athletes, are abuse victims and often end up addicted to things, drug addicts and alcoholics, because of this horrible mind-body connection. So this making a decision to turn our will over to something else, it can take a long time to accept. In turning your will over, you have to accept all your past mistakes. You have to accept all your losses, all your issues. You have to accept yourself. So to turn it over and say, okay, God, I give you me, I have to first take a look at who I am and accept that that's who I am. And this starts in step one by accepting that you're an alcoholic and that alcohol has taken over, or whatever it is. I'm using alcoholic right now because that's my mindset in the 12 steps. So it takes a long time to accept. Acceptance reveals our basic resistance to life. We want to control it. I'll do it my way. I'll do it my way. It reveals our endless capacity for self-loathing. So one of the biggest things I did in my early work with Karen Kenny was to stop saying, I hate myself. Oh my God, I hate myself. I probably said that 60 times a day, minimum, at the worst after Molly died and Roy had left and Kenny and Gracie were so decimated. And I was all wrapped up in drug use with Doug. I hated myself. I hated everything about my life and I hated myself. And it took me a long time to stop saying it. I kind of had to say, I had a hard time. First, she said, try to remove the word hate. And I'm like, it's the first word that comes out after I can't, what else can I hate? And then I can get rid of the word hate. And so we went from I hate myself to I hate my life. We went from I hate my life to I hate that Molly's gone. We whittled our way down to eliminating the word hate from the narrative. Humans also, in our endless capacity for self-loathing, we tend to fall back on fight or flight. We're going to run away from it, or we're going to turn around and fight it. We get aggressive. All right, bring it on, world, bring it on. And we resist. We just resist change. We resist acknowledging that we need help. Resist, resist, resist. And again, athletically speaking, these can all be really positive words. How do you get strong? Resistance training. You resist weight, right? So I'm taking everything that I look at in the gym as a positive attribute, and I have to turn it around and use it, understand it's not always positive for me in my life. Surrender is not giving in, giving up, rather it is giving in. So here's what you're giving into. You're giving into a moment. You're giving into an event. You're giving into a person, the person. You're giving into the situation. So for me, I'm giving into the fact that I have a chaotic life that I cannot seem to schedule or that I don't schedule. I'm giving in to the fact that I still feel very responsible for Molly's death. I'm giving in to the fact that I seem to sabotage every move forward with the Molly B Foundation. I'm just giving in to the fact that these are things I feel like I do. Here's a really interesting quote that came up. What we resist persists. What we resist persists. So I ultimately resist giving in and having a schedule and organizing my life. I've had offers for people to help me. My podcast editor has given me programs to use that can help me organize. And I sort of half-heartedly try them and then I don't. I resist it. I resist it. I resist it. And then what happens is the issue that I'm resisting persists, right? My lack of organization. I resist organization. I resist it. And so disorganization persists. Passive protest is actually Jesus telling us to offer the wicked no resistance. So this is another one. There's that saying, fight fire with fire. Then all you're doing is causing fire and burning things. Jesus said to offer the wicked no resistance. He didn't mean to let bad people do things. But if you stand up and resist the wicked, you're fighting back. You end up projecting and returning the same things. So when you fight something, you keep it. And this is the whole art of giving in and giving up. So if you're angry all the time, then what you attract is anger in your life. If you give off anger, you attract anger. If you give off gratitude, you attract gratitude. That's the shift. That's the giving in. So passive protest, sitting down and crossing your legs in front of a tree that you don't want cut down, right? Passive protest, passive resistance. You're not yelling and screaming. You're not calling names. You're not cutting people off in a conversation. You're not pushing an agenda that hurts people, right? Anytime that happens, you get into the push and the push, you're going to get it right back. Passive protest is actually Jesus telling us, offer the wicked no resistance. We as a culture, however, value control. So this is the author's view on Jesus. That's why I quote Jesus. And I use a lot of those quotes because I think a lot of quotes that we take as like a social construct come from the Bible. A lot of them do.
So as a culture, we value control. I want to control who I am. I want to control what I look like. I want to control where I live. I want to control everything. And sometimes we really have no control at all. The other piece here is that we all have our own inner program for happiness. We have an inner script that runs in our head. We have plans by which we live and how we can feel secure, how we can feel in control, how we feel blissful. And all of these control things are very short term. They keep you happy now, but in the long term, they don't. So a great example for me is my 75 hard, eat well, exercise twice a day thing. That was amazing for 3 months, but it didn't address any of the things that hold me back in my lack of ability to commit to making money on the podcast, to really building the Molly B Foundation up, to doing all of these things that I say and claim I want to do, that I feel in my heart that I want to do, and I don't do. This is not long haul thinking. It causes us to be control freaks. And what we do is we then project our control on other people. So just the other day, we have a dishwasher now, and we didn't used to have one. So Kenny would wash the dishes. So he's in the habit of spending half an hour washing the dishes. And then they're all piled up all over the counter. We don't have a dish rack to dry them because we have a dishwasher. So I got frustrated with him last night. Would you stop washing the dishes? And I took all the clean dishes and put them in the dishwasher. And he's like, they're clean. I'm like, I don't care. I totally took over something. The kitchen's his. If I want him to be in charge of cooking and cleaning in the kitchen, I can't tell him how to do it. But my own lack of control in my own life causes me to project the need to control outwardly. So I had to apologize to him, say, look, I'm sorry. Maybe if you like to wash the dishes, then don't use the dishwasher. We won't use it. We'll open it and use it to put the wet dishes in so they can dry. It's our sub-counter dish rack. But this is an ego cycle. This is a huge cycle based on ego. So whenever I think of ego, I think of like, oh, I'm so full of myself. I have a big ego. Your ego is the self part of your mind. It's the part of your mind that thinks intellectually and socially and culturally about how you fit in and where you can be on the top and how you can be best. And the ego is connected to fear, living in a state of fear. So not like, oh my God, I'm afraid, but that fear of the unknown. So you want to control everything, right? That's ego. And then there's love. And that's where you live in a state of gratitude and openness. And you sort of understand that life will flow and you flow with it and you can moderate where you go, but you're not controlling the river. You're just keeping your boat afloat in it. This is called an ego cycle. I want power. I'm going to take control. Ha ha, I'm always right and I am powerful. Except nothing is right. You know, we joke around. Molly wrote one of her Mother's Day cards about me that I'm never wrong. And I'm sometimes often sure to only speak when I know I'm correct. So I can say I'm never wrong. I'm wrong all the time. But that's the ego cycle of trying to control. So in terms of making a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of a higher power, you have to let go of a lot. And someone like me, I think I get stuck in step 3 in my life all the time. As I record this, it's the first week of July. I'm finishing really the first week of 75 hard. I've had horrible failures. I haven't drank enough water. 4th of July, Kenny and I had drinks, not a ton of drinks, but still we had drinks. We weren't going to. I didn't work out only once yesterday. It's clear my heart's not in it. And I think it's because I realized that it isn't what I need to be focusing on. Do I need to eat well? Yes. Should I abstain from drinking? Yes. Do I need to work out? Yes. I need to do all these things, but I also need to do all of this. I have to stop trying to control my life with extraneous scheduling that keeps me from doing what I want in the name of control. All right. All religions share the view of giving up the self or of surrender. And when I look at a lot of my Baha'i prayers, I testify at this moment to my powerlessness and to thy might, to my powerlessness and to thy wealth. That's a prayer. That's a sentence in the short obligatory prayer, a prayer that I say every day. And we're not standing before God and saying, I'm nothing. We're just simply saying, there are times when I'm powerless. I have no power over this. You have to surrender your power in order to get power back and to get power that's a bit more pure in nature. This gets lost in their desire to control, which I just said. Let them renounce themselves. That's a Christian quote. I think Matthew or Paul said it in terms of if you really want to know Jesus, you must renounce yourself. This brings us to the myth of heroic sacrifice. So this is also me 1,000%. So a heroic sacrifice is kind of like the martyr. There was a movie when I was a little girl called Pollyanna, and there's a snotty woman that brings this disgusting fruit bread to everyone at Christmas because that's what you do. I'm going to give all this bread away. And she does public service, but with a huge attitude, right? I'm so sacrificial. I'm such a good person. I donate my time, and she's not, she's sanctimonious. Heroic sacrifice is when somebody bemoans the fact that they give everything up for everyone else and nothing ever goes their way. And why do I bother? The number of times I say this in my head, it's almost embarrassing for me to do this episode because I realize that I am the equivalent of a raging alcoholic when it comes to step 3. Renouncing yourself for attention and validation. So not really renouncing at all. So I told a story a few episodes back about my friend Jack Frazier, and we coached together. And he got really mad at me because I didn't make time for him, for us to connect, to talk about everything, our friendship, our families, coaching. And I would be like, well, I'm busy. And he said I was selfish. And I'm like, I am not. I spent all my time with the athletes. And he was onto something. He was onto the fact that that was my excuse for getting out of a lot of things, that I wasn't really doing it for them. I was doing it for me as much as for them. And he's right. He was right. So no, you're not really renouncing at all. And you can think of people that go to church every Sunday and sit in the front row in their fancy clothes, and then they go home and treat people like crap. So are they really good, kind people, or are they just doing it so they look good? Getting people to believe in sacrifice, that sacrifice is necessary and important. Jesus never asks us to sacrifice, quite honestly. What he asks us to do is step out of ourselves, to say, I am nothing. I am powerlessness. I have no power here. Give it over. I give myself to you. He doesn't tell us to give all our money to the church. He actually spoke against that. Sacrifice serves people in power. It serves those in power that the commoners believe in sacrifice, right? So a king lets all of the people in his kingdom know that sacrifice means you're a good citizen. I think of the World War II effort, where we did everything for the troops and we rationed food and people, they recycled things to build the war engines. And it brought the community together. Everyone sacrificed together, but the people in charge probably weren't actually fighting the battles or sacrificing themselves, right? They were enlisting sacrifice from those beneath them. So this is what it says. Sacrifice serves those in power that the commoners believe in a sacrifice. World War II war effort is what I wrote in parentheses. While far too often, their children never work or go to war. So the powerful people telling us to sacrifice raise their families in a culture of no sacrifice, right? There is love-seeking spiritual goal of others. So love-seeking, when you're seeking love as a spiritual goal, looking at the spiritual goal of the ones you're seeking love to and from, looking at love as something that's spiritual and judgmentless and free, so to speak, right? Free from constraint or obligation. Then there is love seeking that's superiority, admiration, and control for itself. So love me simply because I am me. Just love me and I will love you just because you are you. Love me because I give to the poor and I support the homeless coalition and I go to church every Sunday and I'm kind to everybody. Love me because I do all these great things, right? Even and mostly by doing good and heroic things. So there are people who love just because they want to love. And there are people who love because they want to be able to say to people, look at all I do. Of course, I'll take you to that appointment. Of course, I'll cancel my work and help you. Of course, I'll do this. But there's no love involved. It's an interaction. So when you look at people that seek love for validation and look at sacrifice with resentment, suicide bombers, right? The manipulative mother, resentful folks, codependents, and we'll get into codependency in a minute, are all selfishly sacrificial. I gave my whole life to my child and they grew up to be a drug addict, Like I worked every day of my life and I have no money to retire. Like these things might be true, but you're using your life as an example of self-sacrifice for pity and support, not for any sort of pure love. Codependency is a term that actually came out of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it refers to people in the addict's life or the alcoholic's life that support the addictive behavior because there's something in it for them. A lot of people in an addict's life don't want the addict to get better because then how will they fit in? Their job is to take care of the addict. If the addict doesn't need care, then now they've lost their meaning in life. I have an addict in my family whose mother claims over and over to want to be helpful and would just continually support the addictive behavior, clearly showing she didn't really want her child to get better. What she wanted was to be able to say she wanted him to get better while he didn't. And it perpetuated this very unhealthy dance. And that's where Al-Anon came from, which is a 12-step group on stopping codependent behavior. Could I use some Al-Anon meetings? Darn right I could. I can be very, very, very codependent. I can claim I want things to be different. And then I set up a reality that totally says I don't want things to be different. So my codependency isn't based on someone else's addictive behavior necessarily. Sometimes I'm codependent with myself. I create realities. I blame other people. I get frustrated with them when really I should be frustrated with myself. And I think in the reading of this book and the recording of these episodes, I'm coming to grips with that and beginning to acknowledge that, that saying I am my own worst enemy holds true for me. So codependents are those whose disease is enabling another's disease. It is everywhere and so prevalent that we all often mistake it for love. It's easy to say, oh my God, she loves her son so much. She bails him out of jail once a week and she buys his food. Okay, those might be loving acts to somebody that has a genuine non-health related, addicted related problem. I'll buy you food until you get rehired at your job. You got laid off. Your wife has cancer, so you quit your job to care for her. I'll help you with your bills. That's very different than perpetuating alcoholism and doing that by paying the bills and buying the food so the alcoholic can stay home and drink. See, it's a bit different. Martyr complex arrives here. I am the martyr. Look at all I've done for you. And I fall into this. I fall into this quite a bit. So holiness must be pure. Think back to that quote that I said at the beginning of today's episode. It must not be out of fear or for gain. People who proselytize, knock on doors to teach their religion, read the Bible in public, talk about the fact that they read the Bible every day, serve at soup kitchens because that's what their religion tells them to do. Not that these things are bad things to do, but the reasoning behind. You get sort of pious people, and there's no room for that in true sacrifice. The martyr complex arrives here. Holiness must be pure, not out of fear. I better be good or Jesus will punish me, or for gain. If I'm really good, everyone will love me. Social esteem is a common motivator. It is. It's a very common motivator. We do things so that people will like us. It would be good for us to learn the meaning of the words, I want mercy, not sacrifice. And mercy is forgiveness without anyone having to acknowledge they made a mistake. Mercy is asking for support and love and help when you're in a low place. Show me mercy. Mercy is having a gun to someone's head and then deciding not to kill them, right? That's mercy, right? Sacrifice, when you're asking for sacrifice, you're asking someone to give something up that they maybe don't need to give up to make the situation better. And especially in ourselves. I should ask for mercy and seek mercy toward myself rather than claim I'm going to sacrifice again and be resentful for what I think I'm giving up. This would stop the holier than thou attitude. So many of these words are so easy to interpret on either side, right? Sacrifice is a good thing. I sacrifice junk food so that I work out better in the gym. Okay, that's a sacrifice that's probably healthy and maybe shouldn't even be a sacrifice. We should just eat well. But there are ways that we manipulate these words to make them positive. So the beauty of the 12 steps in AA is they refuse to fall into the religious dogma of a blessing or a reward. Do something right and you get rewarded. Do something right because you just think you should do something right. So there's a saying, I saw it on social media. And if you're an atheist and you don't believe in God, then why do you do good things? Why don't you just go around and kill people? If your life just ends when you die, what's the point of being a good person? And the response is like, because I want to be a good person, because it's a good thing to do, because I feel good when I'm a good person. I'm not doing it so I get some reward, which makes me sort of think sometimes that really hardcore loving atheists are the most spiritual people of all. They're not doing good deeds because they're supposed to, because they're worried about going to hell. They're doing good deeds because they want to. It's that simple thing. So this is where the 12 steps veer from religion a little bit. We're talking about God and giving over our will to God, but not to a religious doctrine that tells us that we're going to be punished if we make a mistake, or that we should do these things so that God will love us. No, it's all about us. The 12 steps refuse to bless or reward moral worthiness or heroic willpower. So yes, you get a 30-day chip, and then you get a 60-day chip, and a 90-day chip, and a 1-year chip, and then you get them yearly. And the chip is the one day that you can sort of celebrate your sobriety. But understand, when people celebrate their sobriety, it's on their knees with complete humility and gratitude and blessings and thanks to their higher power for enabling them to have one more day of sobriety. It's never like, yeah, I did this. It was so hard, but I did it. You don't hear those words in AA ever. It's mind-boggling to me sometimes. So AA equals this. The starting point is actually unworthiness. I am an alcoholic and my life is unmanageable. I believe I need a higher power and it will save me. And I've made the decision to turn myself over to it. There is no me in that sentence. It's all, I am as unworthy. I am at my bottom. I am as low as I can be. And so there's a saying in the Bible somewhere, Paul said it, which says, "It is when I am weak that I am strong." So when you've finally given it over, when you lie in a heap, you now have complete capacity to be strong. False sacrifice is an actual avoidance of any real renouncing of yourself while looking generous and dedicated. False sacrifice. So you sort of say the words, but again, you've held on to control on some level inside of what you think you don't need to fix. You aren't really acknowledging, all right, I do it, I give it over. And that's me. And I just, the minute I say it, I go back to all my journal entries as a little girl saying, please God, please God, please God, please God, please God, please God, and God not fixing it. False sacrifice is an actual avoidance of any real renouncing of the self. Jesus said no to mercenary or mechanical notions of religion. It's not about how much money you give. It's not how big a church you build. It's not how fancy the statues are. That's not it. And initially, the followers of Christ followed this, but churches loved this doctrine. So Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant churches quickly went right back to the rule following. Show that you're dedicated by giving money and coming to church every day and following the rules. This is because the ego always prefers merit and sacrifice. Jesus and God are without ego, or whatever you call it. The higher power is without ego. Priests and ministers are human beings, men and women, who are easily functioning on ego. It takes a lot of work not to do it, right? To not fall back into our ego mindset. The ego always prefers merit and sacrifice. It prefers merit and sacrifice over grace and unearned love. So grace, show me grace. Grace is that voiceless, wordless acceptance, that love no matter what. I had some 5-year-olds illustrate grace, mercy and grace. It was kind of the same. And they had tulips bent over with a bright sun and then raindrops and the tulips standing up. Part of that could be mercy. Show me mercy, Lord, show me mercy. Here, I'll give you rain. And then the tulip is fed. Then grace would be more like, you know what? I love you so much that I'm going to feed you, even though you haven't asked me to. The ego wants tit for tat, wants to be able to count, keep score. Whereas love, the selfless part of us, wants grace and love, even if we haven't earned it. We don't need to earn it. We can ask for it without having to earn it. To be loved just because someone loves you is a pretty major thing. And that puts a knot in my stomach as well. And so I think I've spent my whole life, really trying to make sure people love me by, I don't know what, being nice to them. The first behavior, merit and sacrifice as our tit for tat on what good people we are, makes us feel heroic. Seeking and lowering ourselves for grace and unearned love can make us feel like we're fools for God. I'm just a fool, right? And that's the ego again, telling us that just asking for love is a weak thing. As long as the spiritual journey was a moral achievement, a contest, none of us felt worthy, ready, or able to come forward. If how good a person you are is a contest, immediately we're going to look at the 50 ways we won't do it. When you're trying out for a sports team, for example, there's a contest. And I know whenever I would be nervous for a time trial or something like a team spot race, all I would think about were the 50 things that might prevent me from placing in the top 6, right? All of the things that I might do wrong in the race. It's a contest. It's easy to focus on the negative, right? To be tense. If it's a moral achievement that we think, if our spiritual journey is some moral achievement, we're not going to feel worthy, we're not going to feel ready, and we won't be able to come forward and say, I give myself to you, God, here I am, here I am. One must split themselves to do this, which causes resentment. So we give part of ourselves over, except we don't. There's this inner voice that continues to control and keep us away from really, truly the giving over to our higher power. And then the resentment comes out. So when I think of how resentful I can be, how frustrated and angry I can be all the time at everyone and everything, I just realize that I hold on so tight. I hold on so tight and I don't give myself over. We also waste a lot of time on whose God is the true God. I have friends on Facebook that will tell me my all religions are one is going to harm my soul, that you have to follow the one true God, which in this person's case is their church and their version of God. AA does not say to you, here's how you have to look at God. AA says, figure out what your higher power looks like, figure it out. What do you connect with? And give yourself over to that. You're really ensuring success right there because you're allowing the addict to create a relationship with a higher power that is theirs, that does not require any sort of moral certitude on their part. It requires that they love and receive love. It requires that they accept the fact that they deserve to be loved and helped. Self-hatred, right? So we waste our time on whose God is true rather than meeting God as we know him or her or them through love, forgiveness, and mercy. That's another sort of mind block that I think people have around the giving over in step 3, right? I also think alcoholics that know they need help but aren't religious could potentially shy away from this because they feel like, oh, well, it's a Christian thing. You have to believe in God. You don't. You just have to believe that something out there is bigger than you. So gratitude comes into play. And I have a journal, which of course I haven't written in forever, called Okay, Fine, I'll Be Grateful. Because I have a really hard time. And I'm doing this wellness journal now. You know me, I start 50 million journals. So I'm doing this wellness journal with my friend Pam. And I haven't listed a gratitude in days. Well, I take that back. I write one down, but sometimes I just think, all right, what the hell am I grateful for? I have the hardest time living in gratitude. And so much of my life, I'm grateful for so many things. So I don't always understand why I feel this way. But I do. I just fall into this bad habit of what am I grateful for? I don't know. Maybe I feel if I'm grateful for something, I owe that person or something. I don't know. It's unsettling sometimes. But here in the 12 steps of AA, only hour by hour gratitude is strong enough to overcome all temptations and resentment. Only hour by hour gratitude is strong enough to overcome all the temptations that lead us to resentment. So if I could do one thing, if I could do one little tiny step, it would just, all right, I'm just going to be grateful for the rest of the day. And of course, I shy away from it. Nietzsche, philosopher, writer, had a resentment toward Christians because of their resentments. And so he had this issues around Christians and the behavior of Christians that he came into contact with. And they were interesting because they follow along with a lot of what I've been talking about. So he resented how Christians had resentments. What do Christians resent in his mind? That God is demanding them to sacrifice. Well, I don't want to do this, but I go to church, I have to. That they resent others for not appreciating. No one appreciates my sacrifices. I do all this. I'm a good person. I'm a God-fearing Christian. No one appreciates me. They resent themselves because they have to sacrifice. And they resent others who they perceive as not having to sacrifice. This was Nietzsche's take on a lot of Christianity. A lot of follow the rules and earn your points to get into heaven. When I was married to Eric, we did Camp Greenacre, and we built a board game that took up the entire field. And the kids in the wood shop made life-size board, game pieces of themselves. Eric had them take tree logs and sticks, and they glued stuff on them, and they made board pieces. And we built a giant game. You spun this giant spinner, and then you ran over to your person, and you moved it that many places, and you did what was on that space. It was answer a quote or whatever. And every once in a while, you would pass by or land upon a spiritual bounty square, and somebody was there with candy. Oh, you've done well. Look at you. You've earned a spiritual bounty. Would you like a candy now? Or do you want to save your spiritual bounties for the Abha kingdom, which is the vernacular for heaven in the Baha'i faith? And some kids ate candy the whole way and others waited. But there you were earning, by doing the right thing, you earned points, right? At the end of this game, we gave everyone a bag of candy and explained to them that you don't have to earn points to get the rewards of heaven. You have to do the best you can. And you have to love God, know and love God, and do as you believe he wants you to do, right? Live a good life. But we fall into it. And many sects of Christianity are absolutely based on following rules. The upshot of making a decision to give yourself over, your will and your life over to a higher power, ultimately will grace us with sweet surrender. We will be graced with sweet surrender if we can radically accept being radically accepted for nothing. So here's the weirdest thing about life. When I was reading this chapter, Eleanor was here visiting our brother, Jonathan, and we were talking about how do you get over things? And they started this whole conversation around radical acceptance, that sometimes you have no choice but to accept. So radically accept it. You can't change it. And like 2 hours later, I read this sentence with being radically accepted for nothing. So this is one of those, I am lovable even though I am unworthy. I deserve love. I deserve gratitude. I deserve peace. Even though I feel like I suck, I still deserve it. I don't have to get up and earn it. I just accept it, that someone or something can love me, that I will be benefited from it. So I'm going to read that again. We will be graced with sweet surrender if we can radically accept being radically accepted for nothing. We accept you just because we do. It's like when Piglet sits down next to Eeyore or Pooh on the bench, and one of them's depressed. And what are you doing here? I'm just going to sit with you. We don't have to do anything. I'm just going to sit with you. It's easier to be sad if you're not alone. being radically loved and accepted for radically nothing. When the heart is pure, love responds to love alone. So that's just getting all the agenda out, getting the ego out, getting the things that you have to do to earn the love, you know? It is easy to surrender when we know that love and mercy is on the other side. And I think for me, my feeling of surrender is, anytime I feel like I've surrendered, I haven't surrendered to myself or to the situation. I've surrendered to the person asking for the surrender, which means I'm surrendering to them. I'm not surrendering to myself and to my reality, because I look at a lot of my surrender as having terrible outcome. So I think I have a negative connection to the word. So here we are, step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we know her, him, it, they, them. A decision. All of this goes into making the decision. So what does our journal have for us here? There were several things that we commented on. I won't read every word of everything. But the first one is acceptance, and how acceptance is not the human mode that we go to automatically. We tend to go to aggression, resistance, fight, flight. And none of these things achieve long-lasting success. Acceptance does. You accept it. Father Richard writes, surrender will always feel like dying, and yet it's necessary to the path of liberation. So you have to surrender. You have to give it away to keep it. You have to lose to win. You have to be sick to be well. Like, it's all of those things way back at the end of step 1. So the question was right about the word surrender. What does it conjure up in your mind? So as I just said, it's not a positive word for me. The word surrender brings a juxtaposition of feelings for me. I go back to my childhood and feel like it means giving up and knowing that bad things are going to happen. A sort of, okay, fine, of desperation. Jack will do that when he wants something and I say no, and he keeps asking and I say no. He'll slouch. Okay, fine. And then he'll go do what I asked or go without, and he's fine. So he's actually kind of giving it over. He's the sweetest thing. In terms of athletics, I see it as an intellectual giving over of my athletic abilities to a coach who can make me great. So surrendering my will, I think I should do a 10-mile run today. My coach says, no, you should do a 6-mile run, but go fast. Okay, fine. I'll do the 6-mile run and go fast. I'm surrendering my will to the will of the coach who can make me run fast. In a race, I think of surrender as giving up. As a life-damaged adult, I see surrender as something I fight all the time. So clearly, it is a negative word for me. I think that's true for all of us. I hope that when you're listening to this, these things come up in your mind as well. And if you don't own these books, not that I should be pushing books, but I'm getting so much out of them. So the next little thing in our breathing, in our exercises at the end of the chapter, is it takes us each a long time to just accept what is, accept ourselves, others, the past, our own mistakes, the imperfection and idiosyncrasies of everything. So it took me 2 years. It took me all the months of the lawsuit and horrible use of drugs and alcohol to finally accept that Molly's never coming back. I'm in acceptance of that. She's never coming back. It doesn't mean I don't plead with her to come back every day, but there were months and months where I could not accept that this was true. I couldn't. What do you find difficult to accept about yourself? This is the question. And about people close to you. Write about whether acceptance seems more or less difficult as you grow older. I still find it difficult to accept all that I let happen to me due to my involvement with Amy and Roy. This is a huge issue for me still, because the damage to my life, which I'll say my decisions to be involved with them and to listen to them caused. I can't blame them for everything, but they played a huge role in where I am right now. The further away I get on an emotional level, I find the more painful the reality becomes. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe I believed him or her. I can't believe I made that decision. I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I allowed that to happen to me. I don't always know what to do with it. Also, my connection to Doug and all that that friendship caused. So those are things that I have a hard time to accept. As I get older, certain things I completely accept. My body is never going to look like it did when I was 25. So I just want it to feel good. I'm good. 10 years ago, I still cared much more about how I looked. I care about how I feel and my health. And if that makes me look good, which I know compared to other almost 61-year-old women, I look fantastic. I get it. But I don't care about those things anymore. I've accepted the fact that this is my reality. I have so much to accept. Oh gosh. Okay, the next one is we each have our own personal program for inner happiness, this script we run in our heads, our plans, by which we will be secure and esteemed and in control. But we are blissfully unaware that these things don't work in the long haul. without becoming control freaks ourselves, right? The only way we can control things is to become a control freak. And then we control everyone around us and nothing is happy. And that's me. That's been me the last couple of years, really since the restraining order with Roy and Jack's birth and all of that. I just had this a couple of years of like, I have to control, I have to control, I have to control. It's a horrible way to feel. Right after Molly died as well. Something has to break our primary addiction, which is to our own power and our false programs for happiness. Our addiction is to our own power and our false programs. Yes, alcohol is the chemical. It could be pot, it could be coke, it could be sex, it could be gambling, it could be beating the crap out of someone you love, it could be setting fires, it could be cutting your skin, throwing up your food, right? That's the visible showing of what the addiction really is, which is power and false programs for happiness. So then it asks here, have you ever had the experience of turning your life over to God? So I have a hard time with this. I don't know in my life that I ever have. And this is what I wrote. I do not believe I have ever truly given myself over to God or anyone or anything. I'm always holding on to that one little thing that I seemingly equate with survival or safety or happiness. I feel like the one time I really gave myself to someone, it was Roy, and look how that turned out. But I have to even acknowledge there, I didn't 100% give myself over to him. This all goes back to my life and how my life was my home life, and then my life with my mother and my biological father, which were these little escapes. So what I learned was you can put up with a really miserable life if you have something you can escape to every once in a while. So I always have an alternate option. I always have a plan B. I always have. Kenny was the first person I met that for a long time, I didn't think I needed a plan B. And I got sucked right into all that drama with Roy, and there was my plan B, right? So I've never, ever fully given myself over. I'll say yes while I'm keeping some little piece of me separate from the yes, right? And this could go back to dishonesty in some ways, but it's more about really not ultimately giving yourself over to happiness and love. No wonder step 3 is so hard for me, making that decision. So this gets back into the renouncing, the selflessness. If any want to follow me, let them renounce themselves. So if you want to follow Jesus, you have to renounce yourself first. Have we ever really heard that? And what do we think that means? We all think that means, oh, you have to be selfless. You have to let people treat you crappy. I know in many forms of Christianity, women are supposed to be subservient to their husbands, put his needs before yours. All I think of is how selfish husbands can be. I'm not sacrificing myself to anybody. I think it's why it's so hard for us sometimes. So it asks us to spend some time reading and reflecting on it, on renouncing yourself. Why would Jesus want us to renounce ourselves? He wants us to renounce the parts of ourselves that interfere with us seeing the love we deserve and earn and can have. And we think we're renouncing all of the ego things we hold on to, which become unimportant in love. My initial reaction goes right to the breathing lessons in step 1. We have to lose to win, etc. At first, it feels like blind and foolish adoration, like a cult following. Give everything up and do what I say. But further reflection shows that you give up yourself for yourself, that by losing yourself for God, God gives you yourself back. That's profound for me. That goes a long way for me in terms of this whole process of giving my will over to God. I like this as well. The absolute genius of the 12 steps is that it refuses to bless and reward what looks like any moral worthiness game or mere heroic willpower. We don't reward sobriety. We thank our higher power for sobriety in front of a room full of newly sober and long-term sober people. We don't go up and celebrate it. Yes, you get a cake and you celebrate it, but it's not an ego celebration. Yay, look at me. It's more like a day at a time, I have done this, and so can you. And the way I did it was to wake up every day, get down on my knees, and thank the Lord for another day of sobriety, and to do my best to be grateful and live in gratitude. That's what this is talking about. And that's what the 12 steps teach. If I can focus on that, I think I'll have a much better success rate of giving myself up and over. So the question is, so much that is unlove and non-love and even manipulative love cannot be seen or addressed because it is so dang sacrificial, right? All that manipulative stuff I talked about in codependency. So it asks how we handle situations when we're being manipulated by someone else's goodness, or how do you feel when someone calls your bluff? So I wrote, so many of my significant relationships have had the narcissistic fake nice aspect, and I get sucked right in to feeling less than worthy and lucky to have that person in my life. Robin, Steph, Roy, Sev to a certain extent, Eric to a certain extent. Some of my best friendships are that way. B to a certain extent. I also feel that I sacrifice myself both genuinely and for reassurance. Getting called out can be tough for me. I've had a couple of experiences in my therapy with Carolina where I'm complaining about something that happened, and all of a sudden I realize that I do the same thing. And I've said to her, "This isn't lost on me," and she just gets a big smile because she sees that I've made that connection. I have a hard time being called out, but I desperately want to be called out. So badly do I want to be called out. And I have some good friends that can do that in a loving way. And that's helpful. And that's what good spiritual mentoring is. KK is really, really good at calling that out in a way that doesn't make you feel insulted or belittled or criticized, but more supported in your journey for self-reflection. All right. We can only live inside the flow of forgiveness if we have stood under the constant waterfall of needing forgiveness ourselves. Only hour by hour gratitude is strong enough to overcome all temptations to resentment. To truly understand forgiveness, we have to have been pummeled with the need to be forgiven ourselves. This is a huge one for me, a huge one for me. And I think it's because I don't feel worthy of gratitude. Who am I to be grateful for anything? So it says, write about a time when you were forgiven for something you did. How did you feel? Then write about a time you forgave someone. So I wrote, I spent a lot of time not offering genuine forgiveness, especially to myself. Sitting here answering this question, all that comes to mind is a long list of actions toward me and by me that can require forgiveness. I can't really truly think of any time I've ever truly said, I forgive you. It's okay. I don't know. My overarching thought is to look up a good Baha'i prayer for forgiveness. So that will be my task as I process this week. That's significant to me because I don't self-forgive well at all. If I'm blocked by a lack of forgiveness, there is no moving forward for me. The next one says, as St. Francis puts it, when the heart is pure, love responds to love alone and has little to do with duty, obligation, requirement, or heroic anything. It is easy to surrender when we know that nothing but love and mercy are on the other side. St. Francis says the most amazing things. Love responds to love alone. True love doesn't respond to somebody giving you a present or making you think you need to earn their love or that you do or don't deserve their love. True love responds to true love. And it's easy to disguise love in manipulation. So the question says, how have you known or experienced unconditional love? What was your response? Can you imagine giving such unconditional love to another person? So in terms of me giving unconditional love, my first thought is my love for and from baby Gordy, Gracie, Molly, and Jack represent unconditional love. They are mine. I grew them. I love them no matter what. Nothing could make me not love my kids, even their death and not being here. I love and ache for Molly and Gordy all the time. And then I wrote, in all honesty, I feel like almost none of my relationships represent unconditional love. I do have to say my mother, she can be angry at me and speak her mind, but she never doesn't love me. I know that she always loves me. I didn't always feel that way about Tom. His love could be very, very conditional sometimes. And I know that when I was being abused, I felt like my love from my father was perverted. And so I didn't even know how to handle it. There was nothing unconditional about that love. That had a lot of conditions to it. My parental relationships had conditions. And I know that I have put conditions on many of my relationships. So I've done it. I've put conditions. I can't say that I stopped loving somebody. Maybe I stopped showing them love. I still have love in my heart for Eric, and we had a really rough time. I still have love in my heart for Roy, and hopefully I just love him because he's a human being. He's so ever present in my head as I process all this stuff. And I think it's because I feel so stupid and foolish for falling into that trap. I wrote, again, Roy comes to mind as someone I gave it all to and how I somehow continue to love him. But unconditional love, I know Kenny loves me unconditionally. Kenny has every reason in the world to hate me, and he doesn't. He loves me, and he does the best he can to show me. He fumbles a lot, but I feel it there. I do. That's a lot of work for simply making a decision. A lot less work than coming to believe. When you look at, I'm going to now come to believe, this will be a process. The breathing lessons were easy. The questions were simple. This is a ridiculous process to simply make a decision. But that's just it. We don't simply make decisions. Even if we don't know it, thousands of tiny steps, see what I did there, have led us to the decision-making moment. The breathing lessons, again, I go back to Jonathan and Eleanor. I can't believe they had this conversation in this time. We have been graced for a truly sweet surrender if we can radically accept being radically accepted for nothing. radically accept that we can be radically accepted for nothing other than just being us. Or grace would not be grace at all. Spend some time writing about your experiences of being accepted or not accepted just for who you are, not for anything you've done. What comes to mind initially, I think, is a lot of my athletes and students that I had over the years. Obviously, I taught them and coached them, but I have this unbelievable love and acceptance from them in my life because I was willing to help them just because. I'm a teacher. I'm supposed to help you. You're my student. I love you just because. I was that way. I didn't favoritize the fastest runner over a slower runner because everyone has their role and their job. They're all doing the work. I love you all equally. I think that's an example of me doing a really good job of radically accepting and giving radical acceptance. Then it says, find a recording of Amazing Grace that you find especially moving. Listen to it prayerfully and let your heart be touched by the experiences of grace in your life. I haven't done that yet, although I love that song. I can sing it, but so I'll do that. And I haven't written about these things yet. And then it says, sometimes our problem is not with sacrifice, but with the motivation for that sacrifice. Is it to gain something, right? If you're the sort of person who readily gives in to someone else's point of view or always puts your own needs after others' needs, write about a time when you did this and then resented it. I got pages. Ask yourself if you might be using self-sacrifice as a way to manipulate those around you. My short answer could be yes. And that's not a healthy way to navigate anything at all. I will say in the last few days, Kenny and I have tried to balance out our schedule because Jack doesn't have any childcare right now. We've been more rigorous about getting up in the morning and all right, it's my time. Go do what you need to do. Okay, it's your time. And a lot of the resentments that go around, I do everything, you do nothing, are disappearing because we're putting it together. All of that for simply making a decision to give our will and our life over to God as we know him or her, it or them. Right? Isn't that crazy? Okay, so the third tradition, so we're doing step 3, tradition 3. The third tradition for Alcoholics Anonymous is this. The only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. It doesn't even say you have to be sober. It just says you want to be sober. There are people that get a 24-hour chip every other day. They go and they get a 24-hour chip. 2 days later, they come back with a 24-hour chip, but they keep coming and they're told to keep coming. I have a couple of friends in my life who drink regularly and go to meetings regularly because some part of them knows that this creates a balance for them. The traditions, again, marry together with the 12 steps so that the integrity of the program, AA, is not compromised by the process of the alcoholic, right? It's like the greater good. And you also can't compromise sobriety for a big group of people that may or may not care about you. So I love including those. That was a lot of work for me. And again, so many things come back to me again and again. The insanity thing. I had this big, massive realization that redoing the 75 hard and redoing the, exercising twice a day and all these things is me doing the same thing as I did last summer and hoping it will work better this time. Not that I shouldn't be doing all the healthy things, but it was such an eye-opener for me that even when I think I'm not, I'm just, okay, this time, okay, here comes July. I'm going to set my schedule up. It's going to work. No, I have to stop. I have to give this over to God. I have to stop trying to control my life and give the will of this control over to something because I can't do this anymore. And that's where I am today at the end of step 3. I'm making a decision. Now is the time. So listen, thank you for listening. I hope that those of you that have ever done 12-step programs don't find this to remove integrity of the 12 steps. And I hope that some of you that are considering it might, maybe you're getting something from this. Mostly, I hope that you can find a little bit of meaning and purpose in the podcast, in the episodes that you can use to help you. So as I always do, be good to yourself. I have lots of things to do in this week to be good to myself here. Be good to someone else. And as always, have a good day, everybody.
Hey, thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories as I love connecting with my listeners. If you would like to get to know Molly, head over to mollybfoundation.org to see what she is all about. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at barb_444, on Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.